Welcome to the Great Loop Radio podcast, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about looper lore, some of those phrases you hear out there, and some of them are very meaningful, and some of them would kind of fit into the if you know category that you'll start hearing as you're out there on the loop. So that's our topic for today. We'll jump into that in a minute, but first, as always, I want to take just a moment to recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors who support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Great Loop Yacht Sales, Passage Maker Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners and viewers to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. And with the sponsor recognition done, I want to welcome Jacque and Tsali Bentley to the podcast. Thanks for joining me, Jacque and Tsali.
Glad to be here.
Glad to be here, Kim.
And a lot of you probably recognize Jacque and Tsali. In addition to have been podcast guests before, they have been Harbor Host of the Year winners, and they have been Volunteer of the Year winners. So we certainly appreciate their help in all things related to the Great Loop. They're also Platinum Loopers. So I asked them to join me today so we can kind of make this an interactive discussion. A lot of the people who are already looping will recognize some of this looper lore, some of these phrases that we toss about. For some of you, some of it may be new. So we decided today to focus in on the looper lore that I guess we would maybe say is accurate, or the positive side. There are some looper kind of phrases out there that probably are things you don't necessarily need to pay attention to. So today we're going to start this with the ones that we believe are true and accurate. If this goes well, maybe we'll do another one and cover the things that maybe you might hear but shouldn't listen to. So with that in mind, I'm gonna bounce one right to you, Jacque and Tsali. Let's start with one that I've heard you say before, and that is to go to Docktails with a Southerner. So tell us more about that. I think there's a little bit more to the phrase there. What is that all about?
Well, as true Southerners, Tsali and I were both born in Georgia and have always lived in Georgia. So Southerners were just known for our Southern hospitality, and it's nothing against anyone from the other parts of the country. It's just that's such a Southern thing. So we always say when you go to Docktails with a Southerner, there will be a feast, and you might even go home with a gift. And one of the greatest things, and I found these on sale, and they were the little Swedish wetted cloths, and it's had little boats on it, and it said home is where you dock it. So I bought a ton of those because they were so inexpensive. And that was our gift that we gave away at Docktails or when people were on board our boat. And just a fun way to say, welcome to the loop.
And it really is a fun way, and it is much appreciated. And I do want to just put out there for everyone who maybe has not been to a Docktails, that is above and beyond.
Yeah, no, it isn't. A gift is not required. Absolutely.
Nor is the feast part. For some of us who get busy and are not good at planning ahead. In fact, we're sitting here at one of the marinas in Charleston, and we were greeted here yesterday by a gold looper. And shortly after we arrived on Nebo, some current loopers who are anchored nearby reached out. So we invited everybody over here to our marina for Docktails tonight, but I made it clear there will be no feast. I do not have time for provisions today, but it mostly is just about kind of getting together. But
absolutely.
And someone asked me one time, how do you start a docktail? And I said, just take your chair, put it on the dock, take a bowl of peanuts or whatever. And I said, there's your initiative and people will come. So sort of like the Field of Dreams. If you build it, they'll come.
Yeah, and Docktails, sometimes people worry, oh, do I have to take something? No, you don't have to take anything. Take your Coke. You don't even have to have an adult beverage.
True.
But it's just a way of, like you said, getting together and sharing experiences on the loop. And like you said, a thing of peanuts is just fine. Or sometimes people might actually, one of the best ones, Ritz crackers with a piece of bacon and brown sugar on top of it. I think you know what I'm talking about.
I do. I believe I also burned that once when I brought those. So it
happens. It can be anything, and it's just a fun time to get together.
It can be, absolutely. So yeah, Docktails is always a good time, and there's no expectation. So people who love to entertain and love to use their galley to make things often bring a feast, as Jacque does, but some of us go a little bit smaller scale.
So we got one for you, Kim.
Okay.
All about it, the schedule. Make no schedule. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so AGLCA has long professed to make no schedule and stick to it. And that is not something I came up with. It's something I heard very early on in my involvement from some gold loopers. And I thought, what an odd saying. Make no schedule and stick to it. And as time goes by, you figure it out pretty quickly. Schedules are what lead people to make bad decisions. In a
Mhm.
few different ways. One is a weather day that perhaps the wind is howling or it's raining or it's cold, and it's just a day that maybe you're better off staying at the dock. You'd be more comfortable. After all, this is pleasure boating. Maybe that's another one. It's pleasure boating. Remember that it's pleasure boating. But for safety, for comfort's sake, there are some days that weather dictates you should stay at the dock. But if you have a schedule and you're just committed to being places, it makes that a lot harder. So for Michael and I, we are both working and it's very hard to avoid the S word, the schedule. So we prefer to work in, goals or benchmarks of where we need to be when. We
Mhm.
left Fort Myers on March 3rd, with our first benchmark being here in Charleston before we have to leave for the Looper Lifestyle Seminar that's happening this weekend. So we got here about 4 days, I guess, before we really had to be. And that's how we try to manage our quote unquote schedule, is build in extra time. Sometimes we get places early, and that's perfectly fine. And if we find we are getting someplace early and nobody has to travel off the boat, we can slow down, we can do more. But that's kind of, we had no commitments, no booked marinas, no nothing for that whole segment from Fort Myers up to Charleston.
Mhm.
But we knew we wanted to be in Charleston by what date. So that's as close as we get to a schedule. And it still does make it more challenging when you see that it's a windy day and it's safe, but maybe not comfortable. And I'll know how that goes if you decide to leave when you probably should stay put. The other thing about a schedule that I've seen people who have missed some really great things because they would arrive somewhere and find out there's a great festival or something, and it starts on Saturday and today's Thursday, and they say, well, we've got to be 2 stops up the river by then.
Very true.
And end up missing out on some things. So that's the whole reason. Make no schedule and stick to that idea.
Well,
So
through our both of our loops, we only had one scheduled stop, and that was that first week in April.
mhm.
So the Masters Golf Tournament, we know where we are.
Yep, that is very true. And that's another thing, especially because that's not at any particular loop stop. You can park the boat where it is, but I'm sure you have your preference of places. And the other thing that's a little bit silly about this is AGLCA tells you not to have a schedule, and then we put events on the calendar and ask you to register 3 months in advance. So sometimes it can't be avoided, but it's part of boating. But let me
We
ask you
like to
another one.
plan.
Yeah, go ahead.
We like to plan like 3 weeks.
Hmm.
Like we'll give ourselves 3 weeks to go so far,
Right.
and then that kind of gives you some weather days, and it gives you some days to stay and play or move on. So yeah, never a schedule, but
Yeah.
just kind of a
We
plan.
look at it in blocks,
Yeah.
just as
Yep.
you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's what I hear from a lot of gold loopers and platinum loopers who have kind of figured out that that's kind of the best you can do. Otherwise, you're rearranging your plans constantly too, because even on
Yes.
days, maybe you're not trying to stick to a schedule, but you had one and it falls by the wayside because of weather days. So yeah, it's a hard thing for sure. Let me throw another one to you that I've heard the two of you say as well, and that is, there are no strangers on the loop, just friends you haven't met yet. Where did that come from?
Back to you, Jackie.
I don't know. I just kind of made that up one day. I think it's really funny. I have talked to so many people, and when we were gold loopers, and they would say, "Oh, we were so scared to reach out to you because you're a gold looper." Well, we always say the only difference between an in progress looper and a gold looper is the 10 minutes it takes to change the flag on the front of your boat. I mean, that's the only difference.
Hmm.
And so we always say, it doesn't matter if you're on a 26-foot boat or a 62-foot boat. We have two things in common. We all have a boat, and we're all doing the loop. And so it's just that don't ever be intimidated to reach out. We're pretty extroverted, outgoing, and
Hmm.
other people are more reserved, but never ever hesitate to reach out, because everyone They may be strangers this moment, but the next moment they'll be your friend. And so we just say there's no strangers on the loop, just friends we haven't met yet.
And we find probably one of the most common topics is weather. So you're always talking about weather no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that friendships form pretty easily on the loop because there's always something to talk about, whether it's the weather or where you've been or where you're going or what's going on with your boat. Um, but when I hear this, I think it goes even deeper than that friendship. And I look at that as help is always there. You may not
Yes.
have met somebody yet, but loopers look out for each other. They help each other fixing the boat, doing whatever it might be. And the same goes with our harbor hosts. I think you guys have been harbor hosts of the year and you're nominated again this year. And myself included, it can be hard to reach out to somebody you've never met, don't know, and to call them or text them and ask them for something. Um, really look at them, those harbor hosts, as just friends you haven't met yet, because they are all, raising their hand and saying, yes, please have loopers call me. I really want to help. So I think it extends
Mhm.
to that. Don't be afraid to ask for the assistance you might need because people are certainly willing out there.
And I think Nebo actually helps in this case because sometimes you feel like you sort of know someone before you reach them or before they reach you.
Hmm.
And so I think it goes along with friends on the loop. You sort of gain gain the knowledge of that person, and it's just more instant connectivity.
Yeah, excellent.
And never hesitate, particularly with harbor hosts. Um, if there's something they can't do, they can tell you, sorry, I can't do that, but I can do this. We can help you in this way. So never ever hesitate, particularly when you need help, to reach out to people.
We're
Exactly.
gonna
And go
no, go
ahead,
ahead,
Sally.
Kim.
No, I usually, if I'm calling a harbor host for something, um, ultimately what I might need is to get to the grocery store, but I don't have to call and say, can you take me to the grocery store? I can call and say, what's the best way here? I can't find an Uber. Does that exist here? What do you suggest I do? And if they can take you, they'll probably offer. And if they can't, they'll give you a suggestion. But for some
Right.
people, I have found it's more comfortable for them to not ask directly for a favor, but to ask for information. And that can be the way to open the door. And, find a way to call that harbor host that makes it comfortable for you. They're there to help for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to throw you another one here, Kim, and that
All
is
right.
about guests. Everybody thinks they're going to have 1,000 guests when they come on the loop, but but
Hmm.
what's the difficulty of having guests, and how does that go into the looper lore?
Yeah. So the looper lore is that you can tell a guest when you will meet them, or you can tell them where you will meet them, but you cannot tell them both of those things. And that comes back to the schedule. If you have promised somebody that you're going to pick them up in New York on a specific date, that leads into the schedule. So if you really are having guests aboard frequently, and a little hint is a lot of them who think that they will come will not, and that's part of this same lore. If you tell the guest, well, I'll either meet you here or I'll meet you on this date, but I can't guarantee both. If they don't have the flexible attitude that it takes to go with you, that's probably when they're going to opt out. When starting from go, you can't tell them both when and where, you have to pick one, they may opt out. A lot of people just can't adapt their regular lifestyle to this type of the flexibility that you need to loop. But so when or where, but not both. Somebody I interviewed recently on the podcast who very successfully brought lots and lots of guests aboard was Scott Wake. And he did it with that same kind of blocks of time that we've already talked about, where he would say, okay, I will pick you up on New York City, and if he could be there in 3 weeks, he would tell them to come in 4. So thereby telling them the date and the time, but knowing he had lots of extra time to get there. So if there were any delays, weather, mechanical, whatever it might be, he had time to make that up. If he was getting close and there wasn't, he could slow his roll or pick places to pick up the guests that you would love to spend a lot of extra time. And then, if you get there a week before them,
Yes,
so be it.
very
You've
true.
got time to explore that. But the flexibility thing is sometimes hard for guests. Have you been able to welcome a lot of guests? You have, actually. I know you have.
Yeah. Well,
How did that
I
work out
remember
with meeting them?
I remember coming down Lake Michigan on our first loop. We actually arrived in Chicago a week earlier than we anticipated. And my sister and brother in law and our daughter were going to meet us there and travel down to St. Louis. So when we knew that we were arriving about a week, we told them, hey, we still got the same original a place to meet, but you're going to have to move your flights up a whole week.
Hmm.
And so they understood that. And then on our second loop, we were going to try to come down the Wisconsin side, and we got stuck in Charlevoix for 10 days while the Lake Michigan calmed down. And we had a friend who was flying up into Appleton, Wisconsin. And so he continued to fly up and take the Badger across Lake Michigan and then come
Hmm.
up to see us. So it's a challenge with logistics, but you're right in the fact that if it's big metropolitan areas, it's the logistics are much easier.
Yeah.
And one of the places we found a great way to get people on board because they think they want to come on board, spend the night, travel with you.
Hmm.
Florida. Florida is a great place. We have several times picked friends up in Cocoa Village, let them spend the night on the boat, go one day 20 miles to Titusville. That's their one day on the boat of traveling. Then they can Uber back to their car.
Right.
So so Florida is great. There's a lot, so many airports in Florida they can travel in and out easily. So we have found that's an easy place.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And don't underestimate the idea that Jackie just said that, I usually equate one day on the boat to about an hour by car. So getting back to a car, not always that challenging. So,
Yeah, and where we spend 8 hours on a boat, after two, they're like, okay, we're ready now to get off.
right. Exactly. So the next one is I want to throw at you is one that I have heard since I started boating. I've heard it a lot, but it certainly applies to the loop, and that's about the show, the showmanship of it. So Jackie and Tsali, why don't you give us
Yeah,
that looper lore and tell us what it's about?
I'll take that. And I think one thing about looper lore is sometimes you remember who told them to you in the instance you were told,
Hmm.
even as much as the looper lore itself. And that is this
Hmm.
particular one because I first heard it from Captain Chris,
Hmm.
and and the looper lore is sometimes you watch the show and sometimes you are the show, and
Hmm.
particularly when it comes to docking. And so I would say that Captain Chris is very good about educational videos about how to do things. And if I'm coming into a dock and I see he's got his phone out there and he could be videoing me, I may just go over to the fuel dock and tie up there until the wind stops. So, so
Hmm.
I try not. We've been the show many times,
Too many
too
times.
many times,
Oh, we've been the
but
show ourselves too.
but we try not to.
Yeah, for sure. What's another one you want to send my way?
Oh, let's talk about, and this is very important. Make the loop your own.
Yeah, and that's important. And this is often one that you'll hear something similar, but sometimes it's in the negative part. Well, I shouldn't say it's in the negative, but things that aren't necessarily true that people will present to you as looper lore, like you have to do the great loop on a trawler, or if you do it in less than a year, you've done it wrong, or only do it as a couple, and or if you take 2 years, that's still not enough time. Whatever it might be, it's really important to make the loop your own. And that goes from start to finish for how long it takes you, for who's going with you, for what kind of a boat you choose, for where you stop or where you don't stop. So many people will tell you how to do it, and there is no right way as long as you're doing it safely and in a way that is meaningful for you. So that has kind of been my mantra for a long time, because there are a lot of people who will tell you how to do it, and I think there's a couple of reasons that you'll find a lot of loopers who want to tell you how to do it. The first one and the main one is that it is such an amazing trip that the vast majority of people really loved the way they did it. And I don't think it's them trying to tell you that you must follow suit. I think it's them really just trying to share how great the way they did it was for them. And that is wonderful. We love to hear those great stories, but just make it your own. Jackie's talking about going to Docktails with a Southerner and she brings a feast. That's not you. You don't have to bring a feast. We've talked about sometimes you are the show and sometimes you watch the show. If you are somebody who never wants to be the show, you might choose more out of the way places to dock. I used to hear that one, by the way, that though either you are the show or you watch the show. I used to hear that at the boat launch a lot. Because that is another place in addition
Well,
to docking. If you're at a boat ramp and you're trying to launch your boat or retrieve your boat, sometimes you are the show and sometimes you watch the show. So,
that's right.
yeah.
And I think you actually drove that point home to us, making your own, because I still remember the first time you asked us to do a route presentation. And when we were packaging it up to deliver it, we had in here like, must do or need to do. And I remembered in the back of my mind because you gave us good guides to
Hmm.
help make the presentation. And you emphasized that make it your own. So we went back and revamped the whole presentation because of what you said. And it's very true. Very
Yeah,
true.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what this group is all about. So as far as boat maintenance, we know that that is not my forte. I'm thankful that Michael knows how to fix things, but give us your take, Sally, on things on your boat that may or may not be broken.
Well, Jackie and I joke all the time that everything on the boat's broken. You just don't know it yet, or you haven't
Hmm.
found it yet. And sometimes it's not actually even broken. But we were going across Lake Ontario on our first loop, and all of a sudden our depth sounder just started reading. It
It's
just
just
didn't read
blank.
anything. It went blank. And Jackie has sort of expression when I touch things. But anyway, she said we got another thing that's broke on the boat. I said, what's that? She said, the depth sounder. And I looked, and sure enough, it wasn't reading anything. And then we just, figured I'd get it fixed at the next port. We chugged along, and that started reading again. So we discovered that our depth sounder just stops reading when the depth is more than 600 feet.
Fair.
And we noticed that again on one of the yeah, on one of the Finger Lakes, we noticed it as well. So sometimes it's not always broken. Sometimes you just don't know how to operate it, maybe. But yeah, there's so many systems on a boat, and so it seems like it's really your lucky day when every system is working perfectly.
Well, and Solly, you also, Solly's very handy. So he fixes most everything, and we're very fortunate about that. But what is it you say? You either fix it yourself or you're writing a check.
Oh yes, yeah, yes. So when you yeah, when you have something done, you're either doing it yourself or you're writing a check. So
Yep.
there's two ways to fix things.
Absolutely, and both of them are fine. I know with my lack of knowledge in that area and our budget, I'm very thankful that Michael can fix things. But the everything's broken standpoint, he's owned this boat for 10 years now, and I don't know, maybe a few months ago, one of the water pumps went out on the engine, and he fixed it and immediately ordered a second because he knew that they were the same age. That was probably the next one to go. And lo and behold, yesterday we started up, and he was doing his normal engine checks before we left, and it needed to be replaced. So we had the part available, which is kind of neat when everything's going to break eventually.
That's
If
right.
you
Well,
have
We
an
we carry
idea
a
of what
lot of
that
yeah,
spare
might be.
parts.
I always say if you took all the spare parts off a Compass Rose, she'd come 2 inches out of the water.
Not a bad thing though.
But speaking of things going wrong like that, okay,
Yeah.
I think you're familiar or the looper lore about running aground.
Yes,
Tell
and
us
there
about
are a
that
few different ways you'll hear this, but there is one saying that goes, there are two kinds of loopers, either those who have run aground or those who will run aground. The other way I've heard that frequently is there are two types, those who have run aground and those who lie about it. So either way you want to take that one is fine. I hear people out there talking about, well, we're not going to do the Trent Severn because we've heard too many people have dinged props there. Or we're not going to do this part because, I hear you can run aground, it's too shallow. Um, it's going to happen. It's going to happen when you least expect it. Um, Regardless of how careful you are, regardless of what troublesome spots you might try to avoid. Um, it happens. It's not fatal most of the time. You'll be able to limp your way to where you can take care of the problem if one was created. In fact, most of the time, depending on where you are, you'll just be able to back off of the shoaling that you perhaps have run aground on and continue on your happy way. But it has
Yes.
happened to all of us. It happened to us just a few days ago around New Smyrna. And it was a very soft grounding, and it was backed it up, and we were able to come through just fine. But there was clearly some shoaling, and we did a few stops later, got somebody to dive the boat and just check on the props, and he could tell which one hit because it had been polished by the sand. And he said, but your other one is bent. So it just goes to show, things happen. And it's part of looping. And it's not typically a dangerous thing for the most part when you run aground. You just have to be ready and expect for that to potentially happen. I don't know if I know of any loopers who have made it through the entire trip with never grounding. How about you two? Did you ground?
Oh
Well,
yeah.
The first grounding on the first loop was Jackie was at the helm, and that's too long of a story to go into. But
well, the next 2 hours all the way to Sarasota was very quiet.
Is that when you took him to the beach, Jackie?
Yes. Well, he hadn't taken me. I wanted to go. So, yes.
That's true.
So
She
you
said she
beached it
wanted to go to the
yourself.
beach, and she took us to the beach. There's no
Yep.
doubt about that. And we had nice polish around the pedals of the prop. And
Mhm.
then just when we finished the second loop coming down the Illinois River, we went over a shoal going into one of the harbors, and we felt it, and we powered our way through it. It didn't take us to a complete stop, but we're getting the boat hauled out tomorrow for a bottom job. So I'm interested to see what the prop's going to look like. So
Yeah.
it's going to hit all of us, no doubt.
Yeah. Do you two carry extra props?
We do not. No. And
So
we only have one.
And we're single engine too. Yeah. So we try to be we say all four eyes are on the water when we travel.
Yep. So my theory is that most boats that have extra props have them because they needed them at one point. They bought the spare set when it had to go on the engine because the others were out being repaired, and count us in that category. So, but the next time it happened, we were very lucky to have those spare set of props. So, it's a big expense and it takes up a lot of space, and that's why I think most people don't have spares until they end up needing a second set to put on while the first ones get fixed. So speaking of running aground or kind of those little mishaps that can happen, how fast do you like to travel, Tsali?
Well, we only cruise about 8 to 9 miles per hour when cruising, but when we're going into someplace unknown, I go on the method that the looper lure that you don't want to hit anything faster than you don't want to travel any faster than you're willing to hit something. So coming into docks and locks, we're very cautious, very conservative, and just based on the fact that if we hit something, we don't want to do any damage, and so we take it slow.
Yeah, absolutely. We do the same. It just makes it a lot less stressful.
That's true.
So yeah, never go any faster than you're willing to hit something is a looper lure that I have heard many times, and certainly one of my favorites.
And then
I have one. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to go on to another one, but go ahead if you had
I was
something.
going to say I have one I really want to share that one of my favorite loopers, Robert and Kay Creech, I should say two of my favorite loopers, but Robert and Kay Creech shared a few of these when I asked for them. And one that I heard them say and thought I had listened. What they said is you will leave on this adventure with twice as much of everything than you will ever need: clothes, food, all of the things. And I have heard that many times over the years, and I left thinking I had really pared down what I was bringing, and I still brought way too much. I still think I have clothes. Every time I pare it down, I still have things that I don't use. How about the two of you? Were you able to successfully bring the right amount of stuff?
No, we laid everything out of the bed at home, and because we've heard this looper lore, and Kay and Robert are very talkative about it. We took everything on the bed and we divided it in half, and then we got on the boat and we divided it in half again. But what I discovered was when you have, let's say, your shirts or your shorts, or you got different stacks. Well, when you do laundry, the ones you just wore you put back on top again. So some of those on the bottom of the bottom of the drawer you never get to, so you shouldn't have brought them to begin with.
I did try though on the second loop, if we realized it was something that we had not used, whether it was an appliance in the galley or whatever, we did try to take some things off. I took some pots and pans off and things like that, and I was like, I need that space to store other things. And we did better with food, I think, of not just, you don't need to go out and buy a case of canned food, especially if you don't eat canned food. Don't go out and buy it. You're not, what they say, Walmart's only, maximum 4 days away. You can get whatever you need.
100%.
One of the hilarious things, in my sister, on our first loop, she demanded, she's like, y'all might get somewhere and you might not can get food. And I'm like, we're going to get food. She insisted that we buy Patriot food, what am I trying to
emergency
foods,
Yep.
We have 2 5-gallon buckets under the steps
of Patriot
food that 2 loops later, we still haven't opened, but it's still on the boat.
Oh, there you go. Just in case of an emergency, right?
We
Yeah.
can both live 2 weeks. Okay. It's a month supply. We can both live 2 weeks. That's
Yeah,
what we know.
I've heard lots of stories like that of people who stocked up on something like they were never going to see a store again. And Sally, I think you're right about the clothes in the drawer. And I think it's a different lifestyle. You know, at home, you try to not wear the same thing with the same group of friends that if you can remember that maybe you wore the last time. And so you're pulling out the things from the bottom and on the loop, nobody cares. You're literally taking the same three t-shirts out over and over again because they're what's on top and that's what's there. It's just a simpler lifestyle. And I had the same problem with my pots and pans, Jackie. I had a went out and got, you know, because this was a bachelor's boat before, so there was awful cookware. And I went out and got the, you know, the nesting set
Uh-huh.
and insisted on like the 7-piece set, which comes with, you know, 5 different sizes of saucepans. And I have a 2 burner stove. I don't know why I thought I needed all of this cookware. So I have
Well,
learned it nests at least. It's compact, but you know.
and I think where it shows up in the fact that you wear the same thing over and over is if you do a blog or if you do Facebook, when you keep seeing yourself in the same pit in the same clothes
All
over
the
and
time.
over.
Yes. Yeah, but the bottom line is nobody out on the loop cares. They're probably wearing the same shirt for the fourth day in a row too.
That's
So
right.
let's take a quick break and play a message from one of our sponsors. When we come back, we'll dive into the last few before we wrap up. So we'll be back in
Okay.
a
Sounds
moment.
good.
Winter Harbor Marina is located on the Oneida River 1.5 miles west of Oneida Lake in Brewerton, New York, just minutes from Syracuse International Airport. Winter Harbor offers the lowest diesel fuel and gas prices from New York City to Canada. If you find a lower posted documented price, they will match it. Their amenities include complimentary courtesy vehicle, 24-hour pay-at-the-pump fueling, dockside water and cable TV, pristine bathrooms and showers, and emergency haul-out service. For more information, call 315-676-9276 or visit www.winterharborllc.com. Winter Harbor is a proud commander sponsor of AGLCA.
How unique is the new Portofino restaurant and events in Utica? Let's start with Utica's only waterfront dining. Inside has been beautifully remodeled into a 2-level dining experience. Choose upstairs for an open, airy, and inviting atmosphere with a beautiful view of the waterfront. For a quiet, intimate dinner, the downstairs ambience makes it the perfect dining spot. Both levels with the same great food, an exquisite menu prepared by our own executive chef. Reserve your dinner experience at portofinoutica.com.
We're back on the Great Loop Radio podcast. Today we are talking about looper lore, some of our favorite Great Loop sayings that you'll hear out there on the water. Jackie and Tsali Bentley are my guests, and they are helping us run through them. So I'm not sure where we left off. Let me ask you one of your favorite Dave Fuller quotes, because David has been a guest here, of course, and we unexpectedly lost him way too soon a few months ago. But some of the looper lore can be attributed to him. So why don't you fill us in on your favorite Dave Fuller quote?
Absolutely. Dave was our mentor through the whole loop process and became a very great friend. And one of the things that he was always saying to us whenever we got anxious was the loop is
That was when I got anxious. But go ahead.
was the loop was no more than a bunch of 1-day excursions all put together in unfamiliar area. And so we just operate that way. We try not to get nervous about what's happening, you know, day after tomorrow or next week or whatever. We just look at it all in 1-day increments, and I contribute that to Dave.
Yeah,
He had
just
a
a
great
series of
way
day
of
trips. Mm-hmm.
he had a great way of taking, if you look at the whole loop, it is quite overwhelming. And he just had a great way of bringing everything down to very simple forms. And so, yeah, we do a lot better when we just keep it very simple.
Yeah, absolutely. One day at a time. It's just a series of day trips. I love that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what about the one when you complete this adventure that you're either going to go to AA meetings or you're going to go to Weight Watcher meetings or
Or
both?
both. Yeah, and that's another one that's been floating around for a long time. I used to hear it at rendezvous all the time when our gold loopers would do their introductions. They would say that, you know, after this, they're on their way to their Weight Watchers meeting or their AA meeting. And this is another one that Robert and Kate Creech reminded me of. But it just speaks to the fun that this can be. Um, you will do a lot of eating. This is a very social trip, and that's what this boils down to. And even for, I hear from so many loopers who think they're going to anchor out a lot and then end up really enjoying the trips out to eat at restaurants with new looper friends or even by themselves, and the Docktails excursions. And, you know, this definitely just speaks to the social part of the trip. As I said, most people really do not actually need AA. And honestly, nobody cares what is in your cup at Docktails. It can be any kind of alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage you like. Nobody's checking and nobody cares. The Weight Watchers part for myself, maybe. um, that comes down to it's a very active lifestyle. If you were a gym person before the loop, you may put on some weight because it is hard to maintain that level of physicality. If you weren't, too active before, you're probably going to lose some weight because you are walking places because you don't have a car. You are up and down stairs on the boat, depending on your boat. So, um,
And you
this is a tongue-in-cheek look at the active and the socialness of the lifestyle is what it comes down to. Go ahead, Sally.
and you bring up a good point there, because everyone says what you normally do in your lifestyle before the loop, you will probably be doing during the loop. So if you have bicycles and you bike a lot before the loop, you'll probably have bikes on board, and you bike during the loop. If you do cooking at home, which Jackie did,
Mm-hmm.
so she cooks a lot of meals on board. So it is an extenuation of really how your lifestyle was before.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, this is kind of a newer one, Sally, but tell us about the loop and it not being a destination. It's not about the destination. So go ahead
Well,
and tell us about that.
I thought of this just the other day, and I guess maybe because of my engineering background, but I visualized the loop. The loop is not a destination.
Hmm.
If the loop was a destination, it would be a line with an ending point, and that's what we found, which goes into the next looper lore that we sometimes talk about. But you want let's
Well,
jump into that.
okay, I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
it's not it's all the little things in between. It's not just a start and an end. It's all the journey in between it. Our first loop, not trying to tell other people how to do it, but we did it in only 9 months, and that was way too
Hmm.
quickly. And it was a bucket list. Our son was getting married. People said, you can leave your boat and just go to the wedding. I said, not a Southern mother. Oh no, we have a lot of planning to do. So we've got to get finished with the loop, check the box. And the second loop, we took our time. We took a complete year, did everything as differently as possible. It was so much more enjoyable because we did all those things in between. I guess that's my take
Yeah.
on it.
And it wasn't, when we first got started, it was a bucket list item. So it
Hmm.
was
Yeah.
a destination.
Yeah.
And I mean, I went to the point that writing a business plan, buying the boat, have so much depreciation, but selling the boat as soon as we finished. And it became a way of life
Yeah.
for
Hmm.
us. And so therefore, that's how I view it as it's a journey. I don't think we'll ever come to our destination on the loop.
Yeah, I love that. It's not about the destination. It's the journey itself. And for you, it's become a way of life, and for so many others. Um, and your son got engaged after you had left for the loop. Um,
Yes.
but one of my favorite things to suggest to people is to not wait for the perfect time to start the loop, and that's another of the looper
Absolutely.
lore. Um, had you known that your son was going to be getting married, you might have postponed it. And then who knows what could have come up, or you may not have decided
Right.
to go around again if you met your objective the first time. I've seen far too many people wait for that perfect time to do the loop, and unbeknownst to them, it passes them right by without them realizing that that was as good as it was going to get of a time. It's almost like waiting for the perfect time to have kids. You're not going to know when it's there.
Well,
Eventually, you just have to bite the bullet.
the great thing about it, life does not stop just because you're on the water. So, as I say, life can get in the way a little bit, but you can get off the boat. You can go visit kids and grandkids, and you can leave the boat, put it up in storage somewhere for the winter if you need to. There are so many options. So, yeah, get started now. Don't wait.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. And I also talk to a lot of loopers who are starting, and it's because they lost somebody close to them unexpectedly. And that also
Mhm.
speaks to, waiting for that perfect time. We're not guaranteed forever. So,
Right. Right.
And so
anyway,
that leads into, yeah, but did you die?
and that
Where is that one?
I hear that out there a lot in general, not just on loopers, but if somebody's telling you like the horror story of what happened to them today, and somebody just goes, "Well, yeah, but did you die?" And I don't hear that on the loop that much, but when somebody submitted that, I kind of loved it because the stories that tend to get the most airplay, so to speak, whether it's on a podcast or it's at Docktails, are the things, the stories on a day when something went wrong. No great story ever it went exactly as we planned it. So, the rough days tend to be what we talk about and what we reminisce about and commiserate about. And I think just that, well, yeah, but did you die, puts it back in perspective because we start and sometimes we do it at rendezvous, right? We start to tell the stories of all the things that went wrong. And I see the new people and their eyes get this big. And anybody who is potentially reluctant is absorbing it like a sponge and going, this is why I don't know if I want to do this. And it's not for everybody. But I just loved the lighthearted approach that having one of those bad days and well, yeah, but did you die? I just kind of loved it. I don't know if you've heard loopers out there saying that. I really haven't. Perhaps it's the newest fleet that is going in that direction.
Almost to that extent. We were down in Key West,
Hmm.
and so there were three couples, and so we all went to dinner, and we had one couple in between us. They had not started the loop yet, but flew down to join the rest of us. And so on one side of the couple in the middle, we're two looper couples, and we started telling our stories, and then we started telling
All
them
the bad
all the
stories.
bad stories,
Right?
and
That's what
then
you
the
talk
couple
about.
and the couple in the middle said, "I'm not so sure we want to do this." But yeah, did you die? No, you're
No. Yeah. Even the bad
uh,
days on the loop are pretty good days most of the time. Things do happen. Um, but here we are to live to tell the story, right?
that's
And
right.
it makes great stories and gives you something to laugh about later.
It
Absolutely. And it makes you stronger.
absolutely makes you stronger. And it also, I tell people all the time, if this was easy, it wouldn't be such an accomplishment to finish it. And the bad days speak to that. Surviving the bad days makes it feel like an accomplishment. So
But that's
we
why it's
love
called an
that.
adventure.
Exactly. That's
It's an
exactly
adventure.
right. So this has been
Yeah.
fun. We should probably come back in a few weeks and take on all those that you hear, but you really should ignore. I think that might be another fun take on this. But Jackie and Tsali Bentley, thanks for joining me. As I said, this has been fun and hopefully it's been entertaining, but also a little bit educational for those who were listening. So thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Kim.
Kim. Appreciate it.
Thanks to everyone who's watched or listened today. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Great Loop Radio podcast. Until then, safe cruising.